Welcome to Desert Foothills Library's interview and Storytime with Batik Artist and children's book illustrator Katalin Ehling. Good morning, Katalin. Can you tell us when you first started making art?
I started making art, my goodness, probably as a very young child. We were living in Germany. It was after the war, and my father got a hold of all sorts of papers and pencils. He would draw, and my sister and I and brother would draw. I mean, there was no television, no radio, so we had to entertain ourselves doing that and doing a lot of reading.
Wonderful. So it was a family affair. Everyone in your family were artists.
Very talented in art, yes.
Oh, wow. And did they continue with art as well?
Well, my father was an engineer, so he basically loved to carve, which he did as a hobby, and did wonderful chess sets and things like that. My mother's art was more embroidery, cooking, sewing, things like that. But my sister and I were the ones who took off and became the artist. She's also a Batik artist, lives in Tubac.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's wonderful. Now, we're going to be reading today from a book that you worked on called The Night the Grandfathers Danced. And I'm curious, could you tell us what it was like to work on, to illustrate a children's book?
It was fascinating. I was a little intimidated about it because it sounded like such a huge project. But I had wonderful editors at Northland Publishing up in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm two hours south of them. And we got together, made out the plan, and went back and forth with sketches and drawings. And finally the editors picked the drawings that they wanted to be turned into batiks. And so that was then my biggest thing, was doing those images. And had to be very, very careful that all the colors in every single image were the same.
Oh, wow.
Because and how all the designs in the clothing were the same. Because children, especially younger children, notice those things, which I never would have thought.
Interesting. So that must have taken a long time. How long did it really take to make all of the drawings and then turn them into batiks?
The whole project was about a year, from start to finish, from first meeting them up in Flagstaff and getting the assignment, reading the book and getting ideas, visual ideas. So I made a lot of sketches. So they first picked from the sketches they thought were most appropriate. And then I would take those sketches that they wanted and drew them up more precisely, just with ink on white paper. And then from there, I got the okay from the editor to go ahead and turn them into batik.
Wow.
And that's what happened.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited to learn more about the batik, but I think we're going to switch gears now and take a look at some of the photos that you brought along that sort of inspired the story.
Well, the first one is this little girl. Her name is Autumn. I think at this stage she was 8-9 years old. And it is her mother who was the writer of the story. They lived and still live in Ute country, northwest in Arizona, southern Utah. And the story is based on their culture, and especially what is known as the bear dance. That's what the book will be about.
Okay. And do you have any pictures of the bear dance?
Actually, I do. Here they are. This is the dancing with the band. It's these open spaces. The book will explain better.
Okay.
Once you see them. And here are the young girls who picked up the grandfathers to dance with, because nobody danced with them. So they weren't lucky dancing with boys their age, and decided to dance with the grandfathers.
Oh, that's sweet.
So that's what the story's based on.
Okay.
And then this just shows the music that accompanies it, but the music is basically what's known as a growler. It's like a notched wooden stick, and then another stick that goes over it back and forth, and it does sound like a bear growling.
Awesome.
So that's one of the components of the story.
Very cool. All right. Well, thank you for bringing those photos to kind of bring this book to life. What do you say we read the story now?
That sounds good to me.
Okay, I'm going to zoom in over here. Did you want to start with a little note from the author?
I think that's a good idea because it explains how it came about. It says, the bear dance came about, one story goes, because long, long ago a bear taught a special springtime dance to a Ute hunter wandering alone in the woods. Bear, the wisest of all animals and most courageous next to Mountain Lion, is a brother to the true people, or the Ute Mountain Utes, and a bearer of magic, and so the hunter taught the dance to his people. Today, bear dance continues as an annual celebration of winter passing and the reunion of families and friends.
All right, I'm going to zoom in here so we can see these beautiful illustrations as you read.
So this illustration is of Autumn getting ready for the dance. And the text starts as Autumn Eyetoo, E-Y-E-T-O-O is her last name, slipped a brightly beaded barrette into her hair, pulling her pink shawl loosely around her small shoulders. She turned toward the looking glass. Autumn smiled at what she saw. It was to be her first bear dance, and she was very proud of her new clothes. As she walked through the sagebrush to the dance grounds, Autumn felt the other children admiring her long ribbon dress and wide beaded belt. She looked around with pleasure, taking in the rich green and pink that spread into the foothills of their sacred place, Sleeping Ute Mountain. Like the bears, it lay sprawled beneath the blue sky, waiting to be awakened. Nearby, frisky ponies picked up their heels and broke into a gallop, showering Autumn with the fresh scent of crushed sage. Autumn's people looked forward each year to the bear dance. It came in the spring when the earth had warmed and the hardships of winter were fading from memory. In the old days, it came when the people moved out of the hills like bears stirring from their winter dens. Now, most of them live in modern houses, but still the ancient dance brought the tribe together every year. Autumn passed the wooden stands where the older people gathered to play the Ute hand games. The incense of cedar fires and simmering stews from the fry bread stands filled the air. Chubby babies nodded off in their cradle boards to the comforting sounds of laughter and song. This was my favorite illustration. Finally, Autumn stood at the entrance to the big, round dance grounds, the place her people called the Cave of Sticks. She squinted into the bright sunlight, looking for a place to sit in the shade of the brush wall. Autumn, come here. It was her best friend, Tashina. Autumn joined her girlfriends on a colorful blanket spread over hard dirt. Now the singer stood and said a few words to everyone in Ute, the language of Autumn's people. Then they started to rub the familiar rattling rhythm on bear growlers, long notched sticks. The grating sound echoed in the drum box, sending out a message to the bears. Wake up, come dance with us, Brother Bear. The bear dance had begun. Autumn watched a funny man with a whip clown around with the dancers. The people called him the Cat Man. He kept them in line and made sure a man got up to dance when a woman brushed him with her shawl. Some old women pushed the girls playfully from behind. Go dance, one said, laughing. The bear dance will be over and you'll end up old and single like me. Autumn blushed. She was still a young girl and had no plans to get married yet, but she did have her eye on a boy her age. When the first song ended, she jumped up and went to touch the boy with her shawl, but he saw her coming and took off at a run, out of reach of the Catman. Autumn's heart sank. She so wanted to join the long line of dancers. Clouds of dust puffed up from their feet as the singing and rhythm filled the air once again. Her feet practiced tiny steps. Some of the young men had two partners, one on each arm. They danced with big smiles on their faces, their braids flying. It just wasn't fair. Autumn and the other girls sat under the hot sun all afternoon. They watched the boys run, yelling and laughing, through the shade of the fry bread stands. The beautiful clothes she had been so proud of now felt dusty and hot. Finally, the sun sank behind the mountain and cast long, cool shadows. For the first time, Autumn noticed a few men who had not been asked to dance at all. They were the very old men of the tribe, with dark, wrinkled eyes and long gray braids. She touched Tashina's hand and smiled. "If the boys will not dance with us, what an honor it would be to dance with one of the grandfathers. I dare you." Tashina's eyes opened wide. "No one ever dances with these old men," she said. Some of the other girls giggled at the thought. Autumn faced them with fierce eyes. Without a word, she rose to her feet and walked across the dance circle. She stood before the first old man. He stared ahead, unseeing, his eyes milky blue. "I hear you are a wonderful dancer, grandfather," Autumn said, touching him with a swish of her shawl. The old man smiled slowly. "It has been a long time since these eyes have seen much, but my feet remember plenty," he said. Autumn took his hand and led him toward the line of dancers. As they stepped into place, the other girls followed, each walking gently beside one old man. Autumn, I too, looked up and saw a pale sliver of a moon, like the claw of a bear, slip out from behind the clouds. She smiled as the bear growlers sent their calls into the night. Her first bear dance had begun, the one her people would remember as the night the grandfathers danced.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, that's always fun to read.
I bet.
I haven't read to children in decades.
Oh, goodness. Well, we're glad you joined us to do so today. So now I know you brought some show and tell for us. So do you want to take a moment and maybe you can show us some of the tools that you use to create these pieces of art for the book?
Basically, I brought these batik tools for show and tell. And here's a wonderful book that was put together by Tamsin Wolf, a friend of mine who's just extremely creative, and she's absolutely wonderful in putting all sorts of fascinating programs together. So these are the batiks that I made on the right side, and this is a step-by-step. First, basically, you might want to see the fabric it's on. It's a cotton. And the wax is applied so you get it on both sides. So the first step was drawing the images. I had these three women in mind. And I waxed here, which means that when this whole fabric goes into the first dye bath, the dye bath being liquid dye, colored dye, which is made with powder. It's not something you paint on. You have to immerse the whole fabric in the dye bath. So step 2, this one shows where you can see the white that was covered on the previous image is still white. And this was put in a blue dye bath. So here, this is what the fabric looked like. And then I waxed here to keep the sky blue.
Oh. So you add wax after every dunk
one.
into the
basically
dye.
You have to go from light to dark.
Okay.
And on this one then, I wanted to add a little green. See, the sky remains blue, the stripes remain white, and here's the green, which is just part of their coats, blankets. And here you can see the green, here and here. And the next step was like a rose color, which ended up being this one here once it's waxed. And then the next one was this sort of reddish color, which I wanted on the blankets here. And then a red for more of a deeper red for the other gal here on the left. And here I've done the bottom. I think I used brown. This was done so long ago, I have to think about it. And then this is actually when everything else has been waxed. This is actually the final image, and you put it in a black dye bath, and then the black will, create these lines, these sketch lines, drawing lines. And what happens is they get ironed. The fabric gets ironed out, and all the wax is removed, and then you have a very nice fabric you can mount a piece of art. So this is really a very basic demonstration. Most of the batiks that I make have a lot more steps to them. And
Well, that certainly gives us an idea of how it's put together. That's very neat how you have to plan out so much ahead of time what you want the final batik to look like, with your colors going from the lightest to the darkest.
actually, this is the final piece.
Ah.
I don't know where the original is. I think somebody bought it. But this is what the final piece looks like.
Beautiful.
So it's just a photocopy.
So,
These are
oh,
the
tools, okay.
This is called chanting.
Let me get in here.
The wax basically is in a hot pot and it's melted. So these they sort of rest in the hot wax, and when you need it, you just scoop up the wax you need, and then you draw or paint with that. And of course, brushes come in handy. But once you use the brush, you can't use it for anything else because the wax just stays in it. It's real stiff. But when you put it in the wax, you can use it again.
So when you actually apply the wax, what I'm seeing here is a solid, but this would be heated up to
Yes.
the melting point. It would
Yes.
be completely liquid.
I have like what do you call it? It's a fryer. Fryer that I put the wax in, and you can control the heat. You don't want it too hot because it smokes, and that's not good. Or it can be not hot enough, which means that it won't penetrate the fabric.
Okay.
And this actually, for the night the grandfathers danced, this was the color of the order of the colors that I did.
Oh.
It's faded since it's really it was a test piece. It says sky blue, and it was blue. And so it went you have to go from light to dark, because every time, if you put something light over something dark, it's not going to do it.
I see.
So that's that.
Very neat. Well, thank you for showing us the tools. Now, if somebody wanted to learn batik, how would they start to learn batik? Are there people who teach it in our area?
Unfortunately, batik was a big thing in schools like 20, 30 years ago. They don't teach it anymore simply because of the combination of electricity and water. So it's not really done. It's done maybe with crayons on paper, where, yes, it can be ironed, but it's not going to be water with electricity.
I
So
see.
that was a big thing. But they even don't teach it in the university level.
Huh.
They're basically individual batik artists who, have done it and taught either in their homes or do a lot of demonstrating. I know for several years I taught batik on paper in my studio, which is a little cleaner than this because you don't have to immerse in a dye bath. It stays all on the surface and you can iron it out. So you eliminate the heat and all of that's required.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have an activity for kids at home if they wanted to participate.
Yes.
We do have some kits available at the library. And I think we have some sketches that you can show us.
Okay, some of these were the trial drawings for the book. This was the double page with the bears. This is the only one. I ended up with 3 papus. I first had the 2.
Okay.
But the fun thing might be to do some coloring or adding whatever else you may feel would be like a great decoration on. Yeah, that was the one, the postcard, right.
So in the kits that you can pick up from the library, we do have these sketches for you to take home and to fill in. And I think this is a postcard that you can actually send to a friend, or we'd love to see your art if you want to send us your postcard.
Have an exhibition.
We could do an exhibition, absolutely. So were you going to do a little coloring for us today?
Yes. I'm not too much into coloring books, but I know children love to do it. So you can use your imagination. I mean, well, yellow is usually for the sun, but if you want to, you can make a yellow sky. And you can make red clouds. Be very contemporary.
Yeah.
And instead of, purple mountain majesties, of course, we have purple there. So that would be one thing. Or you can make the mountain green, you know. The thing is, just use your imagination and do whatever your heart tells you to do. I know sometimes it's easier just to fill things in, but after you get the feel of coloring, then you can do your own drawing and color your own drawing. That's really ideal. Let's see what. So here you can make red flowers. Crayons, I think, are the easiest, especially for younger children. And then we have, I think this is sort of a skin color. But you can use your imagination for color, basically. Now here's a bear, and here's sort of a brown. I'm doing it very fast. Sometimes scribbling looks better than a perfect piece. Okay, let's put him on a purple table.
So I love your color choices, Katalin, for this sketch that you brought today. Now, when you did your batiks for the book, how did you choose what colors you would use for the different dye baths?
Well, I sort of got information from, I got a lot of tutorial items and visual things from Northland Publishing. The staff of the publishing went up to the youth dance and took a lot of photographs. So that, of course, told me exactly what kind of colors I needed to work with. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known.
Okay.
Yeah, pink is a big color. The reds, I think the primary colors. And, of course, the greens for the backgrounds. And working with dye baths, it's a little harder than working with, a paint set or whatever you can paint over. Once you have the green down in a certain color, there's no way you can change it. You can spot bleach to make up your mistakes, but it sticks out like a sore thumb.
I see.
So that's why it has to be done very slowly, very carefully, and really, I closed the rest of my studio down and did no other art except that. So I didn't want to get diverted from being, the focusing was very important.
Right.
And they were large pieces. They were, it's only good me standing here because you can see the size of the tape. So when you see a 2-page spread in the book, this is the size of them all. So I wasn't working small, I was working fairly large. So all the double images in the book are this size, and all the other images are half size.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Wow.
And of course reproduction is a little different than the original. It always is. Sometimes it's too brown, too this, too that, but it's something one can't control.
So
I can't.
So you're going to be having an exhibit opening here at the library when the library does reopen to the public. The pieces that are hanging on the wall, can you tell us about those? Like, I see one hanging over here.
That, yes, Well, I was doing a lot of batiks on Native Americans. That's what the galleries wanted. And I just had fun going to the reservations and going to the pueblos and asking for permission to sketch or photograph. Basically, they preferred if I sketched and not photographed.
Okay.
So that was fun because I put together, a lot of really nice albums of ideas and things like that.
Wonderful. So are these batiks as well?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Okay, let's get a closer look. Got some glare on it, but when folks come in, they'll be able to see for themselves. So I think I meant to ask you before, Katalin, and I'm not sure if I did. What would you say, what advice would you have for young artists today?
Just get pencils, pens, papers, whatever, and start doodling, start playing. And what's so wonderful now is there's so many tutorials you can get online. I mean, we never had any of that, and I often watch artists at work and how they produce, and it's very inspiring, and it doesn't look intimidating, and the kids can have fun doing it. And there's a lot of good books on batik, a lot of good books.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing this with us here today, bringing your tools and your artwork, reading to us, and sharing some of your sketches for kids to take home and work on their own. It's really been wonderful.
By the way, it did get a special award.
Oh.
Outstanding Juvenile Book.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it really is a wonderful story and a beautiful book. So thank you so much, Katalin. We're going to be posting this video along with a video of you doing the batik process on our website. So I think we're going to wrap up for today. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.